Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something really fundamental. It's woven into pretty much everything we do, every thought we have. Expectation.
Exactly. It guides us constantly. And we're looking at it today through some really interesting sources, specifically research focused on AI.
Right. Using AI as a lens to understand this very human thing. So the mission today is to really unpack expectation, what it is, where it comes from, why it's so central to, everything.
That's the plan. Try to get to the core of it, especially thinking about how we might build AI that can, genuinely understand and maybe even empathize with this human trait.
Okay, let's dive right in then. At its heart, what is expectation, and where do our sources suggest it might have come from?
Fundamentally, it's a strong belief about the future.
Yeah.
A prediction, really, and its origins. The thinking points strongly towards evolution as a survival tool.
Survival. How so?
Well, think about early humans. You hear a rustle in the bushes, you expect potential danger, right?
Yeah.
You remember where the good berries were last season, you expect to find them again.
Ah, okay. Predicting threats, predicting resources.
Precisely. Even understanding social dynamics, like who's the leader, who, to avoid that, involves expecting certain behaviors. It gave a huge survival advantage. Anticipation was key.
So it's like our brains developed this kind of built-in prediction machine over time.
That's a great way to put it. And that's where the AI connection is so clear, isn't it?
Because AI is all about prediction.
Exactly. Pattern recognition, predictive modeling. It's analyzing data to anticipate what comes next. So understanding how we develop this ability naturally is, it's pretty crucial if we want AI to truly get us.
Okay, that makes sense on an individual level. But how does this internal expectation engine scale up? How does it end up shaping, the grand sweep of history?
Well, expectations become collective forces. They drive huge events. Think about revolutions. They often bubble up from a shared expectation, right? An expectation that things could be better, that the current situation isn't acceptable.
Or technological progress, the expectation we can always improve things.
Absolutely. That constant drive is fueled by expecting innovation. But there's a flip side, of course.
Unmet expectations.
Exactly. When those widespread expectations aren't met, it can lead to massive disappointment, despair, social unrest, even conflict. Think about, say, colonial expansion.
Right.
Driven by the expectation of finding incredible resources, new lands. It led to huge global shifts, some growth, sure, but also immense suffering and conflict when those expectations clashed with reality or other people's lives.
It's a powerful lens. It shows how collective belief about the future shapes the present. So digging deeper, biologically, what's happening inside our heads? What makes us creatures of expectation?
Biologically, it's fascinating. Our capacity for expectation is deeply wired in. The brain's reward system is key.
Dopamine.
Dopamine, exactly. It fires up when we anticipate something good, motivating us to go after it. And the frontal lobe, our higher level thinking area, that's crucial for planning, for setting goals, essentially for forming these complex expectations about what lies ahead.
And these expectations can actually affect our bodies. You mentioned the placebo effect.
Yes, that's a perfect example. The mere expectation that a sugar pill, say, will work can lead to real, measurable physiological improvements. Your mind's belief influences your body's response.
Wow.
And think about AI in healthcare. An AI analyzing patient data would absolutely need to factor in the patient's expectations about their treatment to get an accurate picture. It's part of the data.
It really complicates things, doesn't it? How our minds shape reality. So how have philosophers, grappled with this, with expectation?
It's a huge theme in philosophy.
Yeah.
Existentialism, for instance, often explores the anxiety that comes from the gap between what we expect from life and, the often unpredictable reality.
The angst of unmet expectations.
Kind of, yes. Then you have utilitarianism maximizing happiness. You could argue that's about trying to fulfill the collective expected well-being or utility. And hope itself, that positive expectation, philosophers have debated its nature and value for centuries.
It raises tricky questions, especially for AI development.
It really does.
Yeah.
Like, is it ethical for an AI to generate an expectation in a human that it knows or calculates is unlikely to be met? That's a serious consideration.
A very deep question. Now, shifting gears a bit, our sources mentioned expectation even pops up in fields like physics and math. That seems less intuitive.
It does at first, but it's surprisingly fundamental there too. In physics, the whole scientific method runs on expectation. You form a hypothesis that's an expectation about an experiment's outcome.
And when the outcome is unexpected.
That's often where the breakthroughs happen. It forces a revision of understanding. And in math, particularly probability theory, you have the concept of expected value.
Right, you mentioned a formula. How does that work again?
Yeah, the expected value, EX, is basically a weighted average of all possible outcomes. You multiply each outcome's value by its probability and sum them up. 60x Sapagagag.
Okay, so the project example.
Right. If a project has a 70% chance of succeeding, let's say success is worth 1 and a 30% chance of failing value 0, the expected value is 1 times 0.7 plus 0 times 0.3, which equals 0.7.
So it gives you a single number representing the average anticipated outcome.
Exactly. And while we probably don't do that math consciously when deciding whether to, say, take a new job, our intuition is often doing something similar, right? Weighing the potential upsides and downsides and their likelihoods. It's a subconscious expected value calculation.
That really connects it. Even abstract calculations reflect this core process. And logic. How does expectation fit into how we reason things out?
It's foundational there, too. Inductive reasoning, where we generalize from observations, like seeing the sunrise every day and expecting it tomorrow, that relies entirely on the expectation that past patterns will continue.
Assuming the future will resemble the past.
Pretty much. And deductive reasoning, like if A implies B and we see A, we expect B, that also works because we expect the logical rule to hold true. These are the bedrock principles AI logic systems are built on.
So our expectations aren't just feelings, they structure our rational thought too. Now let's swing back to the inner world, emotions. How tied are they to our expectations?
Incredibly tightly. Our whole emotional landscape is constantly reacting to expectations. Hope is a positive expectation. Fear is the expectation of something bad happening.
And joy or disappointment?
Joy, satisfaction often come when reality meets or exceeds expectations. Disappointment, frustration, anger, those flare up when reality falls short.
Yeah.
Our belief systems too, whether they're personal, cultural, religious, you can see them as big frameworks of shared expectations about how the world should work, how people should behave.
That makes sense. Frameworks for reality.
And for AI to really understand human motivation, human emotion, it has to grasp these underlying expectation frameworks. It can't just analyze surface behavior.
It's like expectations set the stage, and emotions are the reaction to the performance. And art. Art seems to deliberately mess with that stage, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Art is a playground for expectation. Music is a prime example. Composers build tension by setting up harmonic or rhythmic expectations, and then they either resolve them satisfyingly or they twist them unexpectedly.
Creating surprise or dissonance.
Exactly. In painting, composition, color, subject matter, they all create expectations. Surrealism, for example, just throws those visual expectations out the window.
And movies, theater.
Masters of it. Plot twists, character arcs that defy our initial expectations, dramatic irony where we know something a character doesn't. It all plays on what we anticipate. Even sculpture, its form, its material, where it's placed, invites us to expect certain meanings or feelings.
It's amazing how manipulating our anticipation is so central to artistic effect. Now, something more personal, our sources mention how struggles, misfortunes, they can really reshape our expectations.
Yes, that's profoundly true. Big life events leave their mark. Trauma, for example, can significantly lower someone's expectations about safety or trust or just future happiness in general.
It recalibrates your baseline.
It really can. But conversely, sometimes overcoming really tough adversity can heighten expectations, creating a sense of resilience and expectation that you can handle future challenges.
So it's not always negative.
Not at all. But it highlights the dynamism of expectations. They aren't fixed. And for AI to have any kind of genuine empathy, it needs to understand this. It can't just use a generic model. Someone who's known real financial hardship will have vastly different expectations around money than someone who hasn't, even if their current situation looks similar on paper.
That individuality is key. The history matters. Our sources also listed a whole range of other things: drugs, alcohol, sex, greed, lies, truth, life, death. Quite a mix. How do they relate?
It's a broad list, but you can see the connection. Many are tied to either managing expectations or seeking to fulfill them, sometimes desperately. Drugs or alcohol might create a temporary false sense of expectations being met, an escape.
Or greed, an endless expectation for more.
Exactly, an insatiable expectation. Lies and deception are all about manipulating someone else's expectations for your own gain. And truth, well, it often involves confronting or aligning expectations with reality. Even life and death are framed by expectation, the expectation of continuing, and the shock when that's disrupted.
And our raw emotional responses, laughter, crying, anger, they tie back directly to.
Directly. Laughter often bursts out when something unexpected and pleasant happens, exceeding expectations. crying, anger, aggression, very often triggered when expectations are unmet, violated, or feel impossible to reach.
And we consciously manage expectations too, don't we?
All the time. Think of a comedian setting up a punchline that's pure expectation management. A negotiator starting high. We strategically play with anticipated outcomes constantly. An AI interacting socially would need to pick up on these subtleties.
It's woven into everything, even
Yeah.
just concentrating, focusing. Is that driven by expectation too?
Often, yes. You concentrate because you expect to achieve something. By doing so, solve the problem, learn the skill, find the information. The perceived need for things like health or food is tied to an expectation of future well-being, isn't it?
And that extends to relationships.
Absolutely. Family, friends, partners. These bonds are built on layers of mutual expectations. Trust, support, understanding, honesty. When those fundamental expectations are broken repeatedly, the relationship frays. It can't survive without some shared, met expectations.
Then zooming out again, society. Jobs, status, money, education. These are all markers tied to societal expectations, right? What we expect constitutes a good life or success.
Exactly. These are powerful, often implicit expectations about security, contribution, and standing within the group. And childhood, as the sources noted, is where so much of this foundation gets laid.
A critical period for learning all these expectations.
A massive period of absorption. Kids soak up expectations from family, culture, school, peers. It shapes their whole worldview and what they start to expect for themselves.
So, stepping way back, where did this whole human capacity for expectation even start, in terms of how we first began to understand the world?
The sources suggest a really primal origin, the drive to stop pain and live longer. That basic desire implies an expectation, doesn't it? An expectation that a better, safer state is possible.
An expectation of improvement.
Yes. And as we've gotten, collectively better at meeting basic needs, food, shelter, managing disease, our baseline expectations have actually shot up dramatically. We now expect longevity and quality of life our ancestors couldn't dream of.
Our success changes the goalposts.
Constantly. And from an AI perspective, understand human expectation isn't static either. Early AI was very rule-based. Now it's learning about context, about how expectations vary wildly between individuals, how they shift over time. It's much more dynamic.
So how can AI actually help us understand our own expectations better? What tools does it offer?
It offers some powerful possibilities. Advanced sentiment analysis, for example, can go beyond just positive or negative to pick up nuances like hope or anxiety about the future or disappointment, all expectation-related feelings.
Reading between the lines of language.
Kind of. Predictive behavioral modeling can help map out how certain expectations might influence future choices or reactions. AI could personalize interactions based on understanding your likely expectations and mapping expectations across different cultures. That could be huge for improving communication.
It sounds like that deeper understanding could really make a difference day to day.
It really could. Imagine AI providing genuine anticipatory assistance, knowing what you might need before you ask. Personalized information streams that filter based on what you actually expect to find useful or interesting.
Not just keywords.
Right. And mental health support AI could potentially help people identify unrealistic or self-sabotaging expectations and explore healthier ones. Even movie recommendations get better if the AI understands your expectation for, say, a complex plot versus just mindless action.
But that level of understanding, it also means we need to be careful, right? What should we be aware of?
That's absolutely crucial. We need to remember AI learns from data, and that data can have biases. Its understanding is a reflection of what has been shown. So transparency is vital. We need to know how it's inferring our expectations.
To trust it.
And to guard against misuse or unintended consequences. There are definitely ethical guardrails needed as this gets more sophisticated.
So looking at the present, who's benefiting most right now from this growing understanding of expectation?
Well, currently, you'd have to say businesses are major beneficiaries. Marketing, social media platforms, they leverage insights into consumer expectations quite heavily for commercial goals.
Targeting ads, designing products.
All of that. But the potential is much wider. Individuals could benefit hugely from personalized education or healthcare tailored to their expectations and learning styles. Societies could use this understanding to craft better policies, maybe even mediate conflicts more effectively by understanding the clashing expectations involved.
That's a hopeful outlook. Now, the sources even went somewhere really profound. AI and our understanding of death. How can AI even engage with that?
It's a heavy topic for sure. AI can't understand death emotionally, obviously, But it can process vast amounts of data about mortality rates, life expectancy under different conditions. It could simulate different scenarios or perspective.
Provide context?
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Maybe help manage expectations around longevity or illness. Some argue it might help people focus more on the present by providing a clearer, data-driven view of future probabilities. But the core emotional existential weight, that remains entirely human. And as the sources logically state, once someone is deceased, the concept of them needing to understand expectations becomes, well, irrelevant.
Right, then there's the dark side again. Cruelty, violence. How do expectations fuel those?
Unfortunately, they often play a big role. Unmet expectations can curdle into resentment, feelings of injustice. Violated expectations of fairness can trigger desires for revenge. A lack of empathy is essentially an inability or unwillingness to consider the valid expectations of others.
Dehumanizing them.
Yes, and some ideologies actively manipulate people's fears and expectations to incite hatred or violence. An AI trying to understand conflict would need to analyze these toxic expectation dynamics.
That thought experiment being born without that innate human framework of expectation, it really drives home how central it is.
It does, without anticipation, foresight, empathy based on shared expectations. Purpose itself seems hard to imagine. It highlights what makes our consciousness unique. Early, very basic AI might have been a bit like that, purely reactive, no anticipation.
And this idea of belief in AI, it's less about AI believing things and more about our growing expectation that AI will understand us.
Exactly. Our trust in AI systems will increasingly depend on whether they meet our expectations for competence, fairness, and maybe even a degree of understanding. It's our expectation that's evolving.
And the subjectivity of it all, humor is a great example, isn't it? Why one person laughs and another doesn't often comes down to different expectations being set up and then met or subverted.
Perfectly illustrates it. Shared context, shared expectations lead to shared reactions. Divergent ones lead to confusion or offense. Same with resilience. How you cope with setbacks depends massively on your underlying expectations about challenges, about your own capabilities, formed by past experiences.
So all our different life circumstances create these unique webs of expectation, making each of us distinct. And AI could potentially help bridge those gaps in understanding.
That's the hope. By analyzing patterns, AI could help us see why someone from a different background holds different expectations, fostering empathy rather than judgment, even intuition, that gut feeling.
Yeah.
You could frame that as a very rapid subconscious assessment of expectations based on countless past data points. It's something AI researchers are actively trying to replicate, that quick, experience-based prediction.
So if life for any organism is about meeting needs, for humans it's always filtered through expectation. From an AI's viewpoint, what might our purpose look like?
Well, based on observation, an AI might interpret human purpose as this continuous cycle, forming expectations, striving to meet them, experiencing the outcome, adapting, and then forming new expectations. It's a constant process of projecting into the future and navigating reality based on those projections, both as individuals and as societies.
And AI could help when that process goes wrong, when our expectations cause us pain.
That's a key potential application, helping us with coping strategies. AI might be able to identify patterns, suggesting maladaptive coping ways we react to unmet expectations that just make things worse.
And then suggest alternatives.
Exactly. Suggest healthier strategies, point towards resources, maybe even provide some form of virtual support or therapy focused on managing expectations realistically. And remember, these expectations aren't just abstract thoughts. They have physical correlates in our brains, they manifest in our behavior, they're triggered by things in our environment. AI can potentially track and analyze all those dimensions.
Even something like freedom, that's fundamentally an expectation, isn't it? An expectation of autonomy, of certain rights.
Absolutely. And when those expected freedoms or privileges are undermined or taken away, it violates a deeply held societal and personal expectation, causing significant distress and conflict. It's interesting, as you said, we implicitly teach kids about expectations all the time. Do your homework, be polite, but we rarely teach them about the nature of expectation itself, its power, how to manage it healthfully.
There's no class on managing your expectations 101.
There really isn't. But perhaps a deeper understanding, maybe aided by the kind of analysis AI can provide, could lead to, well, greater collective emotional intelligence.
I have to say, going through all this
Yeah.
deep dive into expectation, it really does shift how you see things. It feels like this invisible architecture shaping almost everything we experience.
That's a fantastic way to put it, invisible architecture.
Yeah.
And understanding it truly does feel transformative. For us as humans, and definitely for how we think about and develop artificial intelligence, it points toward needing more empathy in AI, building more robust human-aware systems, and being much more conscious of the ethical side.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful. To try and sum it up, expectation isn't just some idle thought about tomorrow. It's this fundamental, incredibly complex force shaping our inner lives, our actions, our societies, even our history.
Absolutely. It's constantly operating, influencing our feelings, decisions, relationships, often completely under the radar.
So now that you've journeyed with us into just how pervasive expectation is, we want to leave you with a thought to mull over. How does seeing the world through this lens, the lens of expectation, change how you view your own goals, your frustrations, even your everyday interactions?
Maybe think about a specific time recently where expectation, met or unmet, played a really significant role in how you felt or acted. It's fascinating to start noticing it everywhere.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration.
This is DigitView.